July 11th, 1986. Major Ross Mulhare climbs into the cockpit of America's most classified aircraft, the F-117 Nighthawk. Within hours, he's dead, and the entire stealth program hangs by a thread. But this wasn't just another training accident. This was the moment when a revolutionary aircraft nicknamed the Hopeless Diamond nearly became America's most expensive failure. What you're about to discover will shock you. The world's first stealth fighter, the aircraft that would later dominate the Gulf War and change aerial warfare forever, was actually built on a foundation of lies, crashes, and computer limitations so severe that even Lockheed's own engineers thought it would never fly. Kelly Johnson, the legendary designer behind the U-2 spy plane, took one look at the F-117's design and set it straight, that'll never fly. But here's the twist nobody talks about. F-117's greatest weakness, the very thing that almost killed the program, became its greatest strength. Tonight, we're exposing the classified truth behind America's most secretive aircraft and why the Pentagon spent decades hiding not just the plane, but the disasters that nearly destroyed it. The year was 1975 and American pilots were dying. Soviet surface-to-air missiles had evolved into killing machines, and traditional aircraft were sitting ducks. The Pentagon needed a ghost, an aircraft that could slip through enemy defenses completely undetected. But what they got instead was a flying nightmare that defied every rule of aviation. The F-117 Nighthawk wasn't just America's first stealth fighter. It was a desperate gamble that almost bankrupted Lockheed and nearly cost the lives of every pilot who flew it. From fatal crashes that the Air Force covered up with elaborate deceptions, to computer technology so primitive that it forced engineers to build an aircraft that looked more like a broken mirror than a fighter jet. If you think you know the F-117 story, think again. Drop a yes in the comments if you're ready to learn the classified truth that almost ended America's stealth program before it even began. But first, let me take you back to where it all started, with a Soviet scientist whose mathematical equations would accidentally give America its greatest military advantage. In 1964, a Soviet physicist named Petr Ufimtsev published a scientific paper that his own government completely ignored. This paper contained mathematical formulas that could predict how radar waves bounce off flat surfaces. The Soviets saw it as useless theory. American engineers saw it as the key to invisibility. When Lockheed Skunk Works got their hands on Ufimtsev's work, they realized they could build an aircraft that would scatter radar signals in every direction except back to the source. There was just one massive problem. The computers of the 1970s could barely handle the calculations. This technological limitation would force American engineers to make a choice that almost destroyed the entire program. They couldn't design smooth, curved surfaces like modern stealth aircraft. Instead, they had to create an aircraft made entirely of flat panels, turning their fighter into what they mockingly called the Hopeless Diamond. Two Skunk Works engineers, Bill Schroeder and Dennis Overholser, cracked Maxwell's electromagnetic equations and created a computer program called Echo 1. Using a massive Cray supercomputer, they designed an aircraft that looked like it had been assembled from broken glass. Even Lockheed's own people thought they'd lost their minds, but looking ridiculous was the least of their problems. In 1976, Lockheed was bleeding money from their commercial L-1011 aircraft disaster, losses that nearly bankrupted the entire company. When Ben Rich, the program director, walked into the boardroom asking for an additional $10 million to build prototypes that looked like flying diamonds, the executives nearly threw him out. The timing couldn't have been worse. Lockheed had just lost billions on their commercial aircraft program, and now their star engineer wanted to bet the company's future on something that defied every principle of aerodynamics. The Pentagon was only offering $20 million, but Rich knew the real cost would be $30 million, money that Lockheed simply didn't have. In one of the most crucial presentations in aviation history, Rich and company president Lawrence Kitchen stood before Lockheed's board of directors and pitched the impossible, an invisible aircraft that could change the future of warfare. The board's decision would determine whether America got its stealth fighter or whether the program died in that conference room. After what felt like an eternity, Rich walked out with his $10 million check. But this was just the beginning of the financial nightmare that would nearly kill the F-117 program multiple times over the next decade. The program's budget was repeatedly slashed. And in 1980, the entire project was actually canceled due to concerns about its viability. For months, America's stealth program existed only on paper while bureaucrats debated whether to pull the plug permanently. When the program was finally reinstated in 1981, the real problems began. The F-117 wasn't just ugly, it was aerodynamically unstable in all three axes. Without computer assistance, the aircraft was literally unflyable. Pilots nicknamed it the Wobblin' Goblin because of its tendency to shake and vibrate at low speeds. But the computers that kept it in the air were primitive by today's standards. Flight control systems had to make hundreds of corrections per second just to keep the aircraft from tumbling out of control. If those computers failed, the pilot had perhaps seconds to eject before the aircraft became a flying coffin. The first hint of disaster came during the Have Blue program, the prototype that led to the F-117. On July 11, 1979, the second Have Blue aircraft suffered a hydraulic leak that caused an engine fire. The pilot ejected safely, but the aircraft was destroyed. Investigators discovered that a simple engine exhaust clamp had loosened, allowing superheated exhaust to burn through critical systems. This should have been a warning. Instead, the Air Force pushed ahead with the full F-117 program, determined to get their stealth fighter operational as quickly as possible. What happened next would haunt the program for years. July 11, 1986, exactly 7 years after the Have Blue crash, Major Ross Mulhare, a 35-year-old Air Force Academy graduate, was approaching the end of a routine night training flight. According to witnesses, Mulhare had complained of being tired and said he couldn't shake it before takeoff. But the mission schedule was tight, and tired pilots were expected to fly anyway. At 1:13 a.m. Pacific time, Mulhare's F-117 disappeared from radar screens over the eastern San Joaquin Valley. The aircraft had crashed in California's Sequoia National Forest, killing Mulhare instantly and starting a massive wildfire that burned for days. What happened next revealed just how desperate the Air Force was to protect the F-171's secrets. Within hours, armed guards surrounded the crash site. Firefighters trying to battle the blaze were turned away at gunpoint. A military helicopter gunship circled overhead, ensuring that no unauthorized personnel could get close enough to see the wreckage. But the cover-up went even deeper. The Air Force secretly removed every piece of F-117 debris from the crash site and replaced it with wreckage from an old F-101 Voodoo that had been stored at Area 51. They literally staged a fake crash scene to hide the real aircraft's existence. The deception worked so well that for years, aviation experts debated what kind of aircraft had actually crashed. The official story was that an F-101 had suffered a mechanical failure during a routine training flight. The truth about the F-117 remained buried in classified files, but the disasters weren't over. Just 15 months later, on October 14, 1987, Major Michael Stewart was flying another F-117 on a night training mission over Nellis Air Force Base. Air traffic control watched on radar as Stewart's aircraft began an unexplained descent to the left of its flight path. At 8:33 p.m., the F-117 crashed into the Nevada desert, exploding on impact and killing Stewart instantly. 2 operational F-117s had now crashed, killing 2 of America's most experienced test pilots. The program's critics began asking hard questions. Was the F-117 too dangerous to fly? Had the Air Force rushed an unstable aircraft into service just to meet arbitrary deadlines? The crashes exposed fundamental problems that went far beyond pilot error. The F-117's revolutionary design came with a price that nearly made it unflyable. The aircraft's faceted surfaces designed to scatter radar signals created aerodynamic challenges that engineers had never faced before. Every surface on the F-117 had to be precisely angled to deflect radar waves away from enemy receivers. This meant that traditional aerodynamic principles, smooth airflow, curved surfaces, and streamlined designs were completely abandoned. The result was an aircraft that fought against the basic laws of physics with every mile it flew. The exhaust system alone took 3 years to perfect. Normal jet engines produce a cylindrical exhaust plume that glows like a beacon on infrared sensors. The F-117 needed an exhaust system that would flatten and cool the exhaust while hiding the spinning turbine blades from radar detection. Engineers at Aztec/MCI had to develop a revolutionary honeycomb design using nickel alloy that had never been tested on an operational aircraft. Even more challenging was the aircraft's sensor turret system. The F-117 needed windows that would allow its targeting lasers and infrared sensors to work perfectly, while remaining completely invisible to enemy radar. The first solution, gallium arsenide windows costing $500,000 each, shattered during testing when a technician accidentally bumped one. Engineers eventually solved the problem by creating what they called a tennis racket screen made of stainless steel wire. The spacing between the wires was precisely calculated to block radar waves while allowing infrared and laser energy to pass through freely. But perhaps the most dangerous problem was the aircraft's flight control system. The F-117 was so aerodynamically unstable that it required constant computer corrections to maintain controlled flight. If the flight computers failed, pilots had virtually no chance of manually controlling the aircraft. After the two fatal crashes, the Air Force finally admitted that spatial disorientation was killing F-117 pilots. The aircraft's unusual flight characteristics, combined with night-only operations, were creating a deadly combination that even experienced pilots couldn't handle. The solution was the Pilot-Activated Automatic Recovery System, PAARS. This revolutionary system could automatically recover a tumbling F-117 and return it to stable flight, even if the pilot was unconscious or disoriented. It was the first automatic recovery system ever installed in Air Force fighters, and it probably saved countless lives. But the development of pairs took years, and during that time, F-117 pilots flew every mission knowing that a single computer failure or moment of disorientation could be their last. These brave men, the pilots who called themselves bandits, were literally test pilots on every single flight. The secrecy surrounding the program made everything worse. F-117 pilots couldn't even tell their families what they really flew. Officially, they were assigned to aggressor squadrons flying F-5 fighters in mock combat exercises. In reality, they were flying the world's most advanced and dangerous aircraft on missions that would determine the future of aerial warfare. Despite all these near-fatal problems, American engineers and pilots refused to give up. The F-117 program survived financial crisis, fatal crashes, and engineering nightmares that would have killed any normal aircraft development program. Why? Because everyone involved understood they were creating something revolutionary. When the F-117 finally went public in 1988, after 7 years of absolute secrecy, it vindicated every risk that had been taken. The aircraft that started as the hopeless diamond had become America's most feared weapon. During the Gulf War, F-117s flew only 2% of all combat missions, but destroyed 30% of strategic targets. These magnificent aircraft slipped through Iraq's sophisticated air defense network like ghosts, striking targets in downtown Baghdad, while enemy radar operators saw nothing but empty sky. Not a single F-117 was damaged by enemy fire during the entire war, proving that stealth technology could indeed make aircraft nearly invisible. The program that almost died multiple times had created a revolution in military aviation. Every stealth aircraft flying today, from the B-2 Spirit to the F-22 Raptor to the F-35 Lightning, owes its existence to the engineers and pilots who refused to let the F-117 program fail. The secret that almost killed the F-117 wasn't enemy action or foreign espionage. It was the combination of primitive computer technology, financial crisis, and aerodynamic instability that made the aircraft seem impossible to build and too dangerous to fly. But these apparent weaknesses became the program's greatest strengths. The computer limitations that forced the faceted design actually made the F-117 more stealthy than smooth surfaces would have been. The financial pressures forced engineers to use proven components from other aircraft, reducing development time and costs. Even the aerodynamic instability led to flight control innovations that made future stealth aircraft possible. The F-117 Nighthawk proved that America's military and defense industry could overcome any obstacle when the stakes were high enough. From the hopeless diamond to the world's most feared stealth fighter, this aircraft represents the triumph of American ingenuity over seemingly impossible challenges. Today, most F-117s sit in secure storage at the Tonopah Test Range, officially retired but still occasionally spotted in American skies. Their legacy lives on in every stealth aircraft that follows, a testament to the engineers and pilots who refuse to let the impossible remain impossible. The next time you see a modern stealth fighter, remember the F-117 Nighthawk, the aircraft that almost died so many times that it seemed cursed. but ultimately became one of America's greatest military achievements. That's the real secret behind the F-117. Sometimes the greatest victories come from refusing to accept defeat, no matter how many times failure seems certain. Thanks for watching, and if this story inspired you as much as it did me, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible military stories that shaped our world.